Hey guys, it's Kiki with my first episode. Today we're going to be reading The Do-Over, chapters 1 through 5. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, I'm going to read the dedication, which is for the lonely, the daydreamers, and the ones who find their friends between the pages of books. You matter and your happy ending will come. Sometimes the wait is just longer in real life than in fiction. Prologue, Valentine's Day Eve. When Valentine's Day rears its sugary, sweet, heart-shaped head, there are two types of people who receive it. First, you will have the full-on lovers of the holiday, hopeless romantics obsessed with the idea of the love itself. These individuals believe in fate and soulmates and the notion that the universe sends out winged, mostly naked babies to shoot arrows into single people, thus infecting them with the true love that may cause drowsiness and a massive happily ever after. Then you have cynics, those conventionally souls who call it a Hallmark holiday and complain that if true love exists, its proclamations should be expressed spontaneously on any random day and without the expectation of gifts. Well, I am neither and both of these people. I do believe in Valentine's Day is an over-commercialized Hallmark holiday, but I also think there's nothing wrong with enjoying the materialistic side effects of the celebration. Bring on the chocolates and the flowers and throw in a gift card to the local bookstore while you're at it. And yes, I believe in the existence of true love, but I strongly suspect that fate and soulmates at love and first sight are concepts created by the same people still waiting for Santa to show up with that puppy they asked for when they were 7 years old. In other words, I absolutely expect love in my life, but there's no way I'm going to sit around and wait for fate to make it happen. Fate is for suckers. Love is for planners. My parents got married on Valentine's Day after a month of dating. They fell passionately, wildly in love when they were 18, immediately and with zero consideration of real-world facts like compatibility and differing temperaments, while this foolish behavior led to, me. It also led to the years of disagreements and shouting matches that were the soundtrack of my childhood before the relationship devolved into a screaming breakup next to the tiny shared fountain in our front lawn. But their inability to use logic in the face of feelings gave me the gift of clarity, of learning from their mistakes. Instead of dating boys who make me swoon but are totally wrong for me, I only date boys who hit their marks on my pros and cons sheet. I only date boys who on paper, or an Excel spreadsheet, share at least 5 common interests with me, having a broad outline of their 10-year plan, and dress like they aren't prone to random outbursts of basketball. Which is why Josh was boyfriend perfection. He X'd every single box on my pre-boyfriend checklist. The very first time we met, he'd been overperforming every day for the entire 3 months we'd been together. So, as I stood in front of my closet on that Valentine's Day Eve, selecting the perfect outfit for the following day, I was excited. Not about nude-armed infants or epic cosmic surprises, but about my plans. I had the entire day plotted out. The gift, the words I would say, the appropriate timing of both, and it was going to be exactly what I wanted it to be. Perfection. Why would I wait for fate to lend a hand when I had 2 perfectly capable hands of my own? Confession 1. When I was 10, I started putting confession strips into a box in my closet so that if anything happened to me, people would know that I was more than just the quiet girl who followed the rules. The first Valentine's Day. When my alarm went off on Valentine's Day, I was smiling. To start with, I actually had a boyfriend, and he wasn't just a mad boyfriend either. Josh was a smart, handsome, and arguably the most likable student at Hazelwood High to succeed in a big way. Every time we studied together, he put on his Ivy League tortoiseshell glasses. I swore that my heart actually folded over on itself, causing the sweet pinching feeling that shot warmth through each and every one of my nerves ending. In hindsight, that feeling was probably some sort of artificial defect caused by my steady diet of black coffee and energy drinks. But I didn't know that yet. I pushed back the covers and climbed out of bed, ignoring the sound of Logan's open-mouthed, sleeping breathing from the other side of the mattress. My 3-year-old stepbrother liked to sneak into my room and sleep with me because he pretty much thought I was amazing. And he was right, because as I walked over to where my planner sat open on my desk, I felt amazing. I hummed "Lover" as I put on my glasses and consulted the day's list. To-do list. February 14th. Reorganize scholarship planning binder. Study for lit test. Remind mom to email a copy of the insurance card to office. Remind dad of parent-teacher conferences to make sure he puts it on his calendar. Send an email to internship advisor. Exchange gifts with Josh. Say "I love you" to Josh. I lingered on the last one, picking up my pen and doodling hearts around it. I never said those words romantically before, and since our 3-month anniversary happened to fall on the day, it was almost as if the universe had scheduled it for me. Filled with buzzy excitement, I went into the bathroom and turned on the shower. As I stuck my hand under the stream of water to test the temperature, I heard, Are you almost done in there?" Ugh, I rolled my eyes and stepped under the water. I just got in here. Joel needs to go potty. Lisa, my dad's wife, sounded like her mouth was planted on the door. Bad. Can he go upstairs? I poured shampoo into my hand and rubbed it on my head. I adored the twins, but living with toddlers sucked sometimes. Your dad's in there. Sighing, I said, Give me 2 minutes. I rushed through the rest of my shower, refusing to let the disruption ruin my mood. After toweling off and throwing on my robe, I ran past Lisa and a squirming Joel back to my basement bedroom. I breezed through blowing out my 2 curly hair, still humming love songs before plugging in the iron and steaming out the pexy crease on the right sleeve of my dress. I knew my best friend Chris would roll his eyes and tell me I was being hyper-anal, but why leave the crease when it takes a mere 2 minutes to get it out? I got dressed and ran upstairs to scarf a protein bar before leaving for school. As I ripped open the wrapper, my eyes wandered over the pie pan that was sitting beside the microwave like temptation incarnate. Yes, the leftover piece of French silk pie would taste amazing. I thought as I took a big bite out of the peanut butter and wheat, but got a slice of sugar and carbs was no way to start the day. I looked away from the chocolate dessert and focused on chewing the dry protein bar. Good Lord, slow down. My dad was sitting on the table, reading the paper and drinking coffee like he had every single day of my life. His hair was flame red, the Ponent original to my watered-down, coppery brown version. He gave me a smart-ass smile and said, No one here knows the Heimlich. Isn't that like a parental requirement or something? How do you and Lisa have kids and no Heimliching skills? He stared directly at my overfilled mouth. We foolishly assumed our offspring wouldn't suck down food like sows. You know what happens when you assume, right? Yeah. He winked and went back to the paper. Someone's an ass. Oh, come on, you guys. Lisa came into the kitchen with Logan on one hip, Joel on the other. Can we please not swear around the babies? They weren't in here, I said through a mouthful of bar when we said it. And technically, my dad said, throwing me another wink, ass isn't a bad word. It's a donkey. I grinned while Lisa looked at me as if she wished I would disappear. I'd been splitting time between moms and dads since their divorce when I was in elementary school, but I was still just a nomad in the way. At both of their houses, to be fair, Lisa wasn't the stereotypical evil stepmother. She taught kindergarten, made my dad happy, and she was a really good mom to the boys. I just always felt like I was in her way. I grabbed my backpack and my car keys, threw out a goodbye, and ran for the door. The sun was bright, even though the air was freezing, and we'd gotten a dusting of snow overnight, but it looked like my dad had already scraped by the windows. I heard my phone from the depths of my bag and pulled it out just in time to see that Chris was FaceTiming me. I answered, and there were 2 of my closest friends, smiling at me in front of the red lockers of the junior hallway. I smiled at my phone's cracked screen and my favorite faces in the whole world. Roxanne had dark brown skin, cheekbones for days, and the kind of eyelashes that stubborn moms tried to emulate with extensions. And Chris had heavy-lidded brown eyes, flawless porcelain skin, and curly black hair that stuck up in the most perfectly way. If they weren't genuinely amazing human beings, it'd be hard not to hate them for their good looks. You're at school already? I asked. Yeah, and guess who we just saw? Chris asked, waggling his eyebrows. I want to tell, Rock said, moving in front of the screen. I saw, so I tell. Chris nudged her out of the way. Josh is already here, and I saw him put a gift bag in his locker. I screeched and tiny clapped before hopping into the old Astro van that my dad insisted had character. Big or small? Medium, Chris said. Then Rox chimed in with, which is good because too big means a crappy stuffed animal and too small means a coupon for free hugs. Medium is good. Medium is the dream. I laughed. Their enthusiasm made me happy because up until lately, they'd been anti-Josh. They said he acted like he was better than everyone else, but I knew it was only because they didn't really know him. He was just so smart and confident, and that it was sometimes misconstrued as arrogance. Hopefully this meant that they were reconsidering their opinions. Rox's boyfriend, Trey, popped up in the background and waved. I waved back before I ended the call, dropped the phone, started the van, and sped toward school. Phineas crooned sweetly out of the speakers, and I sang along at full volume to every single word of Let's Fall in Love for the Night. I couldn't wait to see Josh. He refused to give me a hint as to what my present was, so I had an idea of what to expect. Flowers, jewelry. Even though I've been taking 2 full coffee shop paychecks, I bought him the Coach band he wanted for his watch. Yes, I was broke now, but seeing his face light up when he opened it would make it worth it. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. At the first red light, I glanced over. Josh, happy V-Day. Are you here yet? What do you want first? Poem or gift? Poem, definitely. I smiled and the light turned green. As I cruised through our suburban neighborhood, the song on the radio, my antiquated van, didn't even have Bluetooth capability, switched to something screamy and metal. So I started scanning for a tune worthy of the momentous day. Billy Joel, nope. Green Day, negative. Adele, that might just work. I glanced down at the dashboard to turn up the volume, then looked up just in time to see that the truck in front of me had stopped suddenly. I stood on the brake, but instead of stopping, my tires locked and I began sliding. There was nothing I could do. I slammed into the back of the truck, hard. I braced myself for the car behind me to hit, but it thankfully stopped in time. Barely breathing, I looked through the windshield to see my hood was totally crumpled. But the person driving the truck was stepping out, which hopefully meant that they were okay. I got my phone, opened the door, and got out to see the damage. You were texting, weren't you? What? I looked up to see that it was Nick Stark, my chemistry lab partner. Of course not. His eyes dipped down to my hand to my phone, and he raised an eyebrow. What were the odds that I would have hit someone I knew? And not just someone I knew, but someone who never really seemed to like me. I mean, technically, he'd never really been a jerk to me, but he had never really been friendly either. On the first day of chem, when I introduced myself, instead of saying, nice to meet you, or I'm Nick, he just looked at me for a few seconds before saying, okay, and going right back to looking at his phone. When I accidentally spilled my energy drink on our lab table a few months ago, instead of saying, it's okay, like a normal human being, Nick Stark had stared right at me and, without smiling, said, maybe you should lay off the caffeine. The guy was a kind of enigma. I'd never seen him around outside of school, and he didn't really have a clique or friend group that I was aware of. Even though we were juniors, I still didn't have enough information to figure out how to classify him, and I hated that. You were the one who was stopped in the middle of a busy street, I said. There was a squirrel crossing, he replied in a near growl. Listen, Nick, I took a deep breath, found my mental mantra. You were on top of this, and managed. Don't blame, his eyes narrowed. I'm sorry. You are? I crossed my arms and squinted my eyes. Are you serious? You go to Hazelwood? I'm your lab partner. Was he messing with me? The guy never really spoke other than the occasional one-syllabus response, but still, we've shared a table in chem the entire year. Ringing any bells here? That's you? His arm roamed over my face like he wasn't sure if he believed in me or not. Yes, that's me. I was losing my cool because I had very big plans for the day, and this surly boy who was holding me up from making my Valentine's Day happen. And also not remembering me, which, what the hell? He said, you have insurance, right? This is unbelievable, I muttered, looking at his old red truck that didn't appear to look any worse in the back than it did all over. It doesn't look like there's any damage from the end at least. Insurance information, please. He held out his palm and waited. I kind of wanted to push him for his attitude of driverly superiority, But he was a lot taller than me and had broad shoulders that didn't look like they would budge easily. So instead, I leaned into the van and snatched my backpack from the seat before opening the glove box and pulling out the small binder I put together the day I got the van. I flipped up the yellow divider, the "in case of an accident" section, and slid the insurance card out of its protective sleeve. He took it and his eyes narrowed. "You keep it in a notebook?" "It's not a notebook, it's an emergency binder." "And the difference is?" "It's just a way to keep everything protected and organized." "Everything?" He looked at the binder and said, "What else is in there?" "A list of mechanics, tow truck companies, first aid, instructions." I rolled my eyes and said, "Do you really want me to continue?" Nick stared at me for a solid 5 seconds before muttering what sounded like "hell no" as he pulled out his phone and snapped a photo of the insurance card. After that, he insisted on calling the police when my van started smoking. I tried to insist that it was drivable. I needed to get to school to hear my poem, damn it, until the engine went up in flames and the firemen had to put it out. My dad was going to kill me, and then my mom was going to pick apart my corpse until there was nothing left. And I wasn't going to have time for Josh's poem until after first block. "Here." Nick came over from his truck and held out a coat. "I know it doesn't match your outfit, but it's warm." I wanted to say no, because I blamed him for this disaster, but I was chilled. My classic pink Ralph Lauren Oxford dress had been too cute to cover it with a coat, but that had been before I was standing out in the cold watching my vehicle become a bonfire. "Thanks," I said, as I slid into the army green jacket that nearly went down to my knees. Nick crossed his arms and surveyed the scene of emergency responders cleaning up the wreckage. "At least you already had a clunker." "I think you mean classic," I said, even though I hated my creeper van. There was just something about Nick's attitude and the fact that he didn't recognize me that made me want to argue with him. He crossed his arm and said, "You doing okay here?" I fake smiled and bit out, "Wonderful." I glanced down at my phone. No notifications. Neither of my parents answered when I tried calling them, which wasn't surprising. I just really wanted to text Josh, but the last thing I needed was to remind Nick that I might have been distracted when I hit him. The police officer got there quickly after the fireman was relatively nice as he wrote the citation that was sure to get me grounded. Nick looked at me as the tow truck disappeared with my van. "You want a ride? I mean, we're going to the same place, and you're just like that." I looked down at my bare legs and the brown leather booties, clenching my teeth and to keep them from clattering. "Like what?" "Ridiculously. Hey." He actually grinned at my expression. "I wasn't budging on your fashion choices. You look very, polo player's girlfriend." "Don't worry. I was merely referring to your bare legs and the fact that it's like 20 degrees outside." "Ride?" "Yes." I swallowed and buried my frozen nose in the coat collar. It smelled like cold and motor oil. Yeah, I guess." "You mean thank you." That actually made me smile a little. "Thank you so much, my amazing savior." "That's more like it." He climbed into the truck, slammed the heavy door, and buckled my seatbelt. It rumbled to a loud start before he turned off his flashers and headed in the direction of the school. Whatever angry hand he had blaring from the antiquated stereo system was atrocious and way too loud. "What is this?" I turned down the garbage music and held my frozen fingers in front of the vents that were hattling, blowing out warm air. "If you're referring to the music, it's Metallica." "How do you not know that?" Because I have taste, and I'm not 100. That made his mouth slide into a smirk. "What is your go-to driving album then, lap partner?" I was currently super into Fleetwood Mac's Rumors album, but I shrugged and said, "I kind of just listen to the radio." "You poor quality music-starved girl." In this instance, it would be poor, unintelligible, barking, starved girl. "Just listen." He cranked it back up and smiled over at me. "Their rage feels good, doesn't it?" "Feel it, Bunsen burner." "Breathe it in." "I'm good." "Bunsen burner?" I shook my head, but couldn't hold in the smile as the word "blackened" was grunted by Metallica all over his chuck. "I'll just snort my own rage, thank you." After a minute, he turned the music back down in his blinker as the high school approached. He moved the shifter next to the steering wheel, popping into his second gear for the turn. And I think I sounded a little too excited when I said, This truck is 3-on-3. He wrinkled his brows together. How do you know about 3-on-3? I crossed my arms, and it felt kind of cool. I know a lot of things. His mouth went into a filthy smile. Well, that's certainly nice to know. Did he think I was flirting? I didn't mean it like that. He chuckled with his laugh that was deep and rumbly. My cheeks were burning, and I said, my dad had a car with that. Forget it. He pulled around to the junior parking lot. Did he teach you to drive it? What? I reached down and pulled my lip gloss out of my backpack. The car with standard transmission on the column. Did your dad teach you to drive it? Nope. I pulled down my visor and ran the wand over my mouth, remembering all the times my dad had promised to teach me, but ended up getting too busy with work and the twins to actually follow through on his word. That's a shame. His truck fishtailed as he turned at the end of the first row. Everyone should know how to drive a manual transmission. Yeah, they should. I flipped the visor back up and pictured the stick shift in my dad's Porsche, the decades-old project car he'd always said would be mine when he finished it. He finished it 3 years ago. By the way, did you tell your parents that your machine burned down? He gave my phone a sideways glance like he was waiting for me to start texting. I looked out the window. The fact that neither of my parents had called back was nice in a way, as it postponed the immense amount of trouble I was about to get into. But it also stung a bit that they weren't concerned about why I was contacting them when I should be at school. Instead of explaining all those complicated emotions, I said, no, I thought I'd save it as a surprise. Good call. He slid into a snow-packed spot and reminded myself that it was still Valentine's Day. I may have lost my car and would soon be destroyed by my parents, but in a few minutes I'd be with Josh. He read me poetry, gave me my present, and I would say this magical 3 words and everything would melt away. Well, I said, opening the door after he pulled to a stop and cut the engine. Have a happy Valentine's Day. Frick that, said Nick, biting out the words as if I had been wishing him a castration as he got out and slammed the door. I freaking hate Valentine's Day. He stepped out of the truck, took off his coat, and held it out to him when he came around. Well then, just have a good day, I guess. Sure, he said, tossing the coat to the back of the vehicle. Thanks. Confession 2. I once pulled a hotel fire alarm because my parents were sleeping in and I wanted to get to Disneyland before there was a line to see Belle. Emily, I have a note here that says you need to go to the office. Mr. Seward, my second hour teacher, waved a hall pass in front of his face. Oh. I put down the book I wasn't supposed to be reading, stood and grabbed my bag from the floor beside me. I'd been in the middle of a fairly intense scene, so my cheeks instantly got hot as I felt busted. Ooh, Emmy's in trouble. I smiled at Noah, Josh's best friend. He was a tennis player who never said a single word to me until I started dating Josh, who coincidentally I missed this morning because Nick and I got into school just in time for the first hour. So far, this day was not going how it was supposed to. You know me, I said to Nick as I shoved my book in my bag, grabbed my pass, and exited the classroom. I missed Nick Stark's oversized jacket as I walked down the empty hallway. I'd been frozen solid since the minute I handed it back to him in the parking lot. I knew Josh wouldn't have anything that utilitarian in his locker. His light knit navy cardigan was as warm as I get, but I was so cold that I'd probably swing by to pick it up. I looked down at my phone, but the only message I had was from my awful boss at work trying to get to me to come in when I wasn't scheduled. Not on Valentine's Day, sir, or staying breath, which is what I referred to him in my head, which sounded mean, but he really was awful. He'd been known to clip his fingernails in the break room, scroll through Tinder while working, even though he was married, and he never heard of the term personal space. How else would I know so much about his breath? I put my phone in my dress pocket and wondered what the office summoning was about, but I wasn't worried. I had just been notified the previous week that I had won LSP Hardy Excellence in Journalism High School Fellowship, so it was probably about that. I still had to pinch myself over that one. Not only had I been accepted to the prestigious summer journalism program, but where I'd get to stay in an apartment in Chicago and work alongside 50 other high school students for an entire month was going to be 100% paid for. I was beyond excited for the work, but even more thrilled about how good it would look on my college applications. Most of my friends didn't care about that yet, but I was going to make sure that I was going to get into the college of my choice if it killed me. "Hi, Emily." Mrs. Svoboda, the school secretary, smiled and gestured for me to go to the counseling office. "Go on back to Mr. Kessler's office. He's waiting for you." "Thanks." I went back and lifted my hand to knock on the counselor's half-closed office door when he bellowed, "Here she is now. Come on in, Emily." I walked into his office and saw the woman who interviewed me for the fellowship. She was sitting in a chair holding a cup of coffee and giving me hardcore eye contact. Hi." I hadn't expected to see her, but I quickly recovered and went in for a handshake. "Nice to see you again." The woman, Mrs. Bowen, fumbled for my hand and looked shocked by the shake. "You too, though I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." Even with that warning, I didn't expect something bad. I expected her to say I needed more reference, or maybe that it was imperative that they get a headshot for me. Stat. I perched on the edge of the chair in the corner. "Oh, unfortunately, there's an error in the scoring of the fellowship applications. It's come to our attention that some numbers were added incorrectly." My heartbeat picked up a little. Which means you didn't win the fellowship." It sounds cliche, but I felt the blood drain from my face. I felt it. I saw sparkly stars in front of my eyes, and my hearing turned furry as the ramifications of her statement stuck in. Not getting far away from her summer. No prestigious program on the list of college applications. Being left behind while Josh attends his prestigious summer program. No Northwestern. "Emily?" Mr. Kessler narrowed his eyes and looked like he was afraid I was going to faint, as if there were 100 things I felt like doing at the moment, most of them violent, and fainting wasn't one of them. I tied my hair behind my ears and worked for a polite smile. "So that's the final and confirmed tally then." Mrs. Bowen's lips turned down as she nodded. "We are so terribly sorry." "Well," I shrugged and smiled. "What can you do, right? These things happen. I appreciate the opportunity." The woman tilted her head like she couldn't believe I wasn't freaking out. "Trust me, lady, I learned that freaking out never changes a thing." She added, "I just could not apologize enough, Emily." "I understand." I cleared my throat and stood. "Thank you for letting me know." I left with my head held high, went straight to the bathroom. I hated crying, but there was a huge ball of devastation sitting right on top of my sternum that threatened to knock me over if I didn't take a minute. I texted both my parents, and neither of them responded. I was so undignified sitting fully clothed on a toilet and crying, but it was such a blow. Everything I've been working towards might have just been ripped out of my hands, because when the topic of college was first broached after the divorce, my parents were very clear that if I planned on going away to school, I was going to have to find scholarships. The dissolution of their marriage had apparently wreaked havoc on their savings, with all of the fighting through lawyers and such, so there was nothing set aside for my education. I'd taken to heart that and dedicated myself to educational excellence. Since that fateful conversation, I had earned all A's, thrown myself into writing for the school newspaper. I'd taken the ACT 5 times, even though my score had been exemplary the first time. Every little point counted after all, but in order to go somewhere like Northwestern, my dream school, without my parents bankrolling the excursion, I needed perfection, impeccable extracurriculars, letters of recommendation, a plethora of volunteers' hours. I needed everything, and even with those, I might still fall short. The other thing I didn't like to admit to myself was that I didn't want Josh to beat me. We had the same GPA, the same weighted 4.4 GPA, and it irked me when he pulled ahead. I couldn't stand the smug look that crossed his face when he was winning, as if Josh was doing better than me. Affection was not the feels was coming over me. was not the feels that was coming over me. I spent a few more minutes getting control of my emotions before I wiped my eyes and stood. It was Valentine's Day, damn it! I was going to soak up every glorious moment of that and not think about the rest of that until tomorrow. There were 2 more written in red events left on my to-do list. Gift exchange and saying those 3 big words. I was going to throw myself into checking out those boxes and forgetting the rest. Confession 3. I have a perfect fake ID. Between classes, I stopped at Josh's friend Blake's locker to ask if he had seen my boyfriend. I'd yet to connect with him in person on Valentine's Day, and I desperately needed to see his face. There was no way for us to have the perfect day I'd planned if we weren't going to be together. Blake was leaning against the wall and texting when I said, "Have you seen Josh? He's usually hanging out in the comments between classes, but I don't see him anywhere." "Nah." He looked over at my head, appearing as always like he didn't even see me. I never figured out if Blake hated me or if I scared him, and it drove me to distraction. Chris always said I had serious issue with needing people to like me, and I always considered him to be wrong, except for when I was in the presence of Blake. He said, "No idea where he is." "Well, thanks." I turned away and felt silly just for existing. Blake was one of those guys that just made you feel that way. When I first met Josh, when we were both selected to be tutors at math lab, we showed up to the counselor's office at the exact same time, at the exact same minute. And I almost swallowed my tongue when he smiled and held the door for me. I knew who he was, but then again, who didn't? Josh was the it boy of the educational excellence crowd. Not only was he a ringer for that swoon actor whose name was spelled Timothy with 2 E's, but he had his life together. Debate, DECA, mock trial. He wasn't just in those activities. He was the best in them, and he knew it. Josh had the confident swagger, one of those wholly positive that he knew more than everyone else in the room. He casually referenced Shakespeare and Steinbeck, and while discussing daily notings, he could often be found conversating with the teacher in empty classrooms during passing periods, and he dressed like he was ready to be a college professor, right down to the good leather accessories. I had been sucked in by his smile, but it was his ability to thoroughly analyze Titus Andronicus that made me fall for him. Most people hadn't read my favorite and most brutal Shakespearean play, but it was his favorite as well. We bantered for a solid 20 minutes about Titus and Tamora and the hellscapes they'd been patriarchal Rome, and he'd been so perfectly perfect for me that I had gone for it. I smiled and asked him if he wanted to study with me after school at a Starbucks. I'd had to call in sick to work in order to make it happen for us, but I know it'd be worth it, because in every way, Josh was the perfect guy for me. I was mopping my way to my locker when I had an idea. What if I left Josh's gifts on the front seat of his car? Mr. Carson usually lets us ditch study hall to go on a coffee run next period, so this way I wouldn't have to stand there feeling awkward while he opened it because I wouldn't be there. And once he saw my amazing present for him, he would rush to find me and give me mine. I snuck out the side door and headed for his car, a 1959 MG coupe that he'd restored with his dad and loved more than life itself. It made him feel a very James Bond. Only when I got close enough to the hood ornament, I saw, what? I squinted my eyes into the bright February sun and looked through his windshield. Josh was in the car, sitting behind the steering wheel, but he wasn't alone. He was facing someone in the passenger seat. All I could see through the windowed reflection was long blonde hair, which happened to be the defining feature of Macy Goldman, the stunning, beautiful girl he'd gone out with before me. The engine turned on and made me literally jump as I stood there staring. My stomach felt heavy as I told myself they were just friends. He was going on a coffee run, and she probably just wanted coffee too. He was riding along to help bring him back. I was about to walk over and knock on the window when it happened. I was standing there with the box in my hand, the box wrapped in bright red heart wrapping paper, when she leaned closer to him and brought his hands up to his face. Frozen, I watched as she held his cheeks in her palms and then kissed him. My breath stopped in my chest, and the moment held. Push her away, please, Josh. And then, as I stood there in the freezing parking lot gripping Josh's passion, he kissed Macy back. No! I hadn't realized I'd said it out loud until their heads jerked apart, and they both looked at me. Josh immediately threw open his door, but I wasn't sticking around to talk. I turned and headed back toward the building. And wait! I could hear his footsteps and then his hands on my arm stopping me. He turned around and blinked back tears and managed to say, "What?" Josh ran a hand through his hair and looked confused. "She kissed me, Em." His breath puffed in front of his face as he spoke quickly. "I am sure it looked awful, but I swear on my life, she kissed me." He had tears in his eyes, and I wanted to punch him in the mouth. I was supposed to be saying "I love you," yet her lips was on his mouth. "You have to leave me, Em. Get away from me," I said through gritted teeth, turning and leaving him behind in the parking lot. Confession 4. I once stuck a fly swatter in a neighbor's oscillating fan just to see what would happen. It blew apart. It wasn't until after I pretended I was about to vomit, complete with the covering of my mouth and the running for the bathroom, that I convinced the nurse to sign a pass to let me go home. And it wasn't until after I had the pass that I remembered I no longer had a car. So on top of everything else, I had to walk home. It was 23 degrees outside, and there was snow on the ground. Yet I was going to be trudging through drifts and ankle booties and a shirt dress. Next start happened right. I dressed ridiculously. I shoved my pass into my backpack and was about to exit the building when I heard, "Emily!" I turned around and there was Macy Goldman walking toward me. I wanted to just ignore her or maybe pull her hair, but a twisted part of me wanted to hear what she had to say. "Listen," she ran up to me breathless. "I just want you to know that Josh isn't lying. We were about to get coffee. I was just talking in his car, and I was the one who leaned in and kissed him. There's nothing going on between us." I regretted listening to her because up close, she was even prettier than she was from a distance. It was all me. He did nothing wrong. So, I felt surprisingly numb as she looked at me with a nervous expression. "You still like him then?" That made her look super uncomfortable. She pressed her lips together before saying, "Well, I mean, forget it." I shook my head, suddenly exhausted with everything. "It doesn't matter." "Yes, it does, because Josh, I can't talk right now." I turned and exited the building. I'd wanted love that was better than my parents' love. Something that was built to last. That wouldn't end the neighbors calling the cops when my mom broke off Statue Cupid's head and threw it at my dad. But now I had felt heartbroken as I did on that terrible day. I started trudging home, trying to hold it together as the winter wind whipped my face. Thank God my dad lived in the next subdivision. Any farther, and frostbite might have been yet another surprise I could have added to the momentous Valentine's Day. My phone buzzed, and I wanted to scream when I saw it was my boss again. I always helped him out, and no one else would, so he always called me because he knew I couldn't say no. I put my phone away without answering. When I finally got home, I was surprised to see my dad's car in the driveway. He was usually at work at the time of day. I unlocked the front door and went to the living room. "Hello, Dad?" He peeked around the wall of the den. "Hey, Squirt, why are you home?" I got sick." "You okay?" I nodded, although I wasn't okay at all. It was the day where it was all supposed to happen for me. For once, instead of sadly commemorating the anniversary of my family splitting off into 2 separate units, I was supposed to feel the rush and say the words. I had done my homework, I found the perfect guy, and today had been marked for love. Now, however, it appeared as though I had finished the day without saying or hearing those 3 words. I probably finished it with a stomach ache buried under a pile of Snickers wrappers. Maybe I need to grab my planner and add that to my to-do list. "Well, I'm actually glad you're home, because I wanted to talk to you about something before the boys get home." "Okay, sit down." He gestured me into the den, and when I did, he plopped down onto the loved seat and patted the spot behind him. I don't even really know how to say this. How many times could one person hear that in a day? Just say it. I popped down next to him and pictured Josh kissing her, Macy Goldman. How bad can it be? He let out a breath. "I've been offered a promotion, but it requires me to move to Houston." My eyes opened. "Texas?" "Texas." "Oh, wow. That was like 15 hours away from Omaha." Before I could say anything else, he said, "After a lot of soul searching, I decided to take the job." His words were a punch to the gut. How was his 50-50 custody supposed to work from the other side of the country? I took a shaky breath and said, "You have?" "Yep." He gave me a wide, genuine smile, like he was thrilled about the news and not at all worried about not sharing his wild enthusiasm. "It's a great opportunity, and you know Lisa's whole family is from Galveston, so it would be nice for the boys to get closer to their grandparents. You're going away to college soon, so it really won't affect you that much." In a year and a half. I'm going to college in a year and a half. I cleared my throat and burrowed a little deeper into the sofa, trying not to sound emotional as I asked, when will you be moving? Next month. But your mother and I talked about it, and we both think that since you're 16, you're old enough to decide what you want to do. What do you mean? My head was spinning. Well, since you're graduating next year, I'm sure you don't want to move and start a new school. We discussed it, and without fighting, I know, surprising, right? We came to the decision that you can stay here with her until you go to college, if that's what you want. What's my other option? He looked surprised by my question, because probably he knew how into Josh and my friends in school I was. Well, he started running a hand over the top of his head. You can certainly move south with us. I just assumed that it wouldn't be your choice. I leaned fast and felt a little suffocated. Little waves were washing over my nose, and I couldn't catch my breath. My dad and his perfect new family were moving to Texas, and he had no qualms about leaving me behind. How could he even consider moving across the country without me? In his defense, the dynamics between my parents and me were so dysfunctional that he probably had no idea how much he meant to me. I always been a good kid, the kind of kid that parents didn't have to worry about. The homework was always done. I never talked back. I always followed the rules, and I happily went along with what everyone else wanted. In a normal nuclear family, the kind of stuff made my parents proud, right? But in a family such as mine, it made me forgettable. The post-divorce, Dad had a new wife, a new house, 2 shiny new little munchkins, a fuller than full life. And my post-divorce mom had a new house, a new husband, a puggle that she treated like a baby, a shiny new career that was more time-consuming than an actual human child. So that left me to play with the unfortunate roles of the leftovers from their previous marriage, who just shelved back and forth between residences, showing up on my court-assigned days, somehow surprising them with my presence. I could not count the number of times I entered their houses, only to hear someone say, "Oh, I thought you were at Dad/Mom's today." I also cannot count the many parent-teacher conferences and dentist appointments were missed because they assumed the other was taking me, or the times I crashed at my grandma's without telling either of them, and no one ever called to see where I was. I was so good that my parents didn't have to worry about me, so they didn't at all. That being said, the two of them were far from equal. My mom had driven with a capital D. She was all work all the time. She seemed to think her primary role as a parent was to ensure I behaved the exact same way. My dad, on the other hand, was funny, chill, and sweetly concerned about me, and when he wasn't distracted by the new love of his life, when we were together, we'd still make some close father-daughter knit duo we'd always been. I adored my dad. He just sometimes forgot about me if I wasn't standing right in front of him. He was also looking at me intently, clearly waiting for my answer. Did a tiny part of him want me to go with him, or did a tiny part of him not want me to go with him? I shrugged and worked for a smile. I'm going to need to think on this one a little. He nodded in agreement and shifted the conversation to my red car. He'd seen my text at lunch, but by then it was too late for him to call me. I listened to his lecture about paying attention and following too closely, but all I could think about was the fact that I'm going to have to memorize what it sounded like when my dad got home every day so I wouldn't forget. All I could think about was the fact that he was absolutely fine with leaving me behind with a woman he divorced and called impossible to live with. I went up to my room and called my grandma. "Hello?" "Hey, Grandma," I sniffled and tried to keep everything inside. It felt like letting go for a second. I'd never been able to stop crying. I need to come over. Can you get me? Are you at school? No, I looked out the window and noticed the sun had disappeared behind the clouds and the sky was just a dark gray. The nurse sent me home early. I'm at Dad's. She made a noise. Are you sick? I felt my arms wrapping around my body. No, I saw Josh kissing someone else, so I faked barfed, and I need to get out of here. That little prick! I'm on my way. 12 minutes later, Grandma pulled into the driveway with her 69 Mustang. I knew it was her without looking because her beloved murdered-out muscle car rumbled like a motor beast. I ran down the stairs. I'm going to Grandma Max's. My dad looked at my face, and he knew I was upset. When will you be home? I grabbed my backpack from my floor. She said I can crash there. Lisa came out of the kitchen looking irritated. I haven't heard her come home. But I just put chicken in the oven. Thanks, I'll heat it up tomorrow. She frowned and gave Dad a look before I escaped out the door. Confession 5. My grandma taught me to do burnouts in her car when I was 14. The soup will be ready in 20 minutes. Sounds good. I lay on the crushed velvet sofa, wrapping up in sadness and the smell of soup, and stared at the television. Thanks. You do know, darling, my grandma said, carrying an Afghan across the room and laying it over my legs, that your worth is greater than what Josh or any other boy thinks. I know, but I didn't. I didn't want to listen to her be kind when the reality was I wasn't enough for Josh. He had texted me 5 times since I left school. Can we talk? Did you leave? Meet me by my locker after school, please? Going to the library now, but I did nothing wrong, Em. This isn't fair. Now I'm mad. Call me. I was just too broken to formulate words and sentences in response to his inquiries. Every time I tried, every 5 minutes or so, I ended up crying and picturing him kissing Macy. Sometimes I don't understand why you don't open your mouth and say the words that are on your tongue, my grandma said, walking over to the kitchen and turning down the stove. I get the privilege of hearing you let loose. Why with your anger? Others should too. You are not the people-pleasing mouse you support yourself to be. Burn some cities down with your rage. Her speech was punctuated with the aggressive stirring of the soup. What do you want me to do, Grandma? Just unload on people? A little bit, yes. She glanced over her shoulder at me and said, Quit worrying about making everyone else happy. I'm not good at it like you. Grandma Max was fierce and absolutely incapable of losing an argument. It's easier to just say what people want. She grabbed 2 bowls out of the cupboard and started filling them with soup. But doesn't that eat you up inside? I shrugged. My insides were shredded, regardless of how they got that way. I pictured Josh and felt myself literally getting heavier in my body. Because even if he wasn't a match for me, what did I know about love or anything? It had been hours since I left school. I felt like I should be finding some perspective. But instead, I just felt empty. I dropped the throw on the sofa, went over on the table, and sat beside my grandma, thinking about the newest awful decision I had to make. I had sat at this table with her hundreds of times. Could I really leave her and go to Texas? She said she'd be fine if I decided to go, but would I? My grandma was like one of my best friends, and the only one I was ready to tell her about Texas yet. I like to say I was worried about how my widowed grandma would survive without my presence, but it was really the other way around. She took a bite of her soup. Pepper! What? She went down onto the stove and started messing with the stove pot. I was distracted and forgot to add pepper. Grab some and sprinkle it on your bowl before you take a bite. I'm sure it's, don't be lazy. Go get the pepper shaker in the china cabinet and properly season your soup. I went over to the armoire and pulled out a Tappy Cat pepper shaker. I doubt pepper will make a big difference. Hush and shake. I took the pepper into my bowl, sat down, and lifted my spoon to my mouth. But instead of tasting grandmotherly deliciousness, my mouth was instantly on fire, in a very bad way. Gah! I felt a shock go through my entire body. My spoon fell to the floor. I grabbed the glass of milk she set beside my bowl. I gulped down every drop. My mouth was still burning. I ran over to the kitchen sink and put my lips under the faucet, turning it on and sucking down every wet and stingy drop I could get. Dear Lord, Emily, what's gone into you? Did you over-pepper your soup? I wiped my lips to the back of my hand. My mouth was still simmering, but it no longer felt like my saliva was going to eat away at my teeth. I don't know what's in that shaker, Grandma, but that isn't pepper. My mouth still tastes like fire, and I'm barely used to any. Oh my, Grandma's eyes were naked. Did you use a Tabby shaker? It has a P on it. Her eyes got a little twinkle, even though she didn't smile. That atrocious pepper shaker was a wedding gift from my mother-in-law. It has lived in my cabinet since I received it 50 years ago. I didn't know it had anything in it. Are you telling me that I just ate whatever inside of that shaker was when great-grand Leonona bought it half a century ago? She coughed around a laugh. What if it was one of those do-not-eat Celia pellets? My grandma walked over to the table and shook some into her palm. No. She lifted her hand and sniffed. It appears to be pepper. Just very old pepper. 50-year-old pepper. Perfect. My mouth tasted like the bottom of a dumpster. That's it. I'm going to bed. But it's only 7 o'clock. I know, but I feel like every minute I'm awake on this nightmarish day, the danger of my life. So far, Valentine's Day has wrecked my car, revoked my fellowship, stolen my boyfriend, moved dad far away, and possibly poisoned me. I'm going to read myself to sleep before things get any worse. I find it unlikely that things can get any worse, right? I walked over to the linen cabinet and grabbed the clear bag of bedding my grandma had always kept for me for my clean sleepovers. But I am erring on the side of the caution, just in case. Wow, guys, that was a lot. On my end, it's 37 pages for 5 chapters, which isn't bad at all, but wow, that was a lot. I feel like I got to really know like our main character, Emily. But like, okay, the thing is that her name is spelled like the French way. It's like hold on guys, let me find it. It's like Emily. So it's like part of me wants to say Emily, and part of me wants to say Emile or like some other French way. So I'm not really sure how to pronounce her name, to be honest. But yeah, that's going to, I'm gonna need to figure that out, because I actually looked it up before reading the book, and it says like in the English way, like it's Emily, but I don't know, and it doesn't have like any like apostrophes or anything like that, so I think it's Emily. Hopefully it is, but yeah, so we're just gonna continue doing this 5 chapters at a time. These aren't really labeled as chapters, they're labeled as confessions, and then like a little title at the end, which I think is cool. So yeah. Anyways, this was chapters 1 through 5, and then our next episode should be 6 through 11. So yeah, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, feel free to rate or comment or whatever floats your boat. But yeah, I'll see y'all next time. Bye!